I grew up with severe haemophilia. I have severe haemophilia B. There was a family history of haemophilia. My mother had four brothers with haemophilia, and two of the brothers died in their 20s from bleeding, and two survived until their 50s and 60s. And she also lost two sons before I was born through haemophilia, and I have a younger brother with haemophilia. So there were quite a lot of people with haemophilia in the family. So growing up as a child, it was quite difficult because, as you know, you basically got bleeding episodes into joints or muscles nearly every week. So you would get, and these are spontaneous. They don't have a cause. You don't have to bang the knee or the elbow. You just start bleeding into the knee or elbow. So typically you'd get a bleed. The knee would swell. It would get quite painful, and there was no treatment available. You just had to rest it, ice it, and there was quite a lot of pain. It was difficult to sleep. That was quite a tough situation. Then after 4 or 5 days, the bleed might resolve. You would strap up the knee to give it some support and then go back to school. During childhood, I would miss an average of 6 weeks school each year from bleeding. And I very quickly learned the importance of education. My parents were very good in pointing it out to me. So when I was sick, I still studied. I caught up at school, and I always worked really hard at school. It was difficult because you couldn't do a lot of the things your peers could do. You weren't supposed to play contact sports. Now, I played soccer. My parents didn't know I played soccer. I played soccer, and every time I played soccer, I'd get a bleed in my ankle. So eventually I realised you had to stop doing this. So it was very, very difficult. You went from one bleeding episode to the next, typically had maybe 30, 40 bleeds every year, damage to joints. And it wasn't until I moved to Dublin to go to college that I started getting access to regular treatment and home treatment, and that really did transform your quality of life because you could then take treatment, on-demand treatment, to treat a bleed as soon as it started, and then later on I moved on to prophylactic therapy, which protects you from bleeds actually occurring. The first time I ever actually got factor concentrate, I was 14. I was brought to hospital in Dublin overnight by car because I had a bleed in my throat and my throat was closing up. And I got factor concentrate, which was really, really important. I was lucky; it was just available at that time. If that had been a year earlier, I may not have been able to get that. They may not have been able to stop the bleeding. Let me explain first of all that haemophilia is a sex-linked inherited disorder where the defect is on the X chromosome. So typically the female will carry the gene but not generally be affected, and the male will get haemophilia. So it is inherited. Queen Victoria was a carrier. She passed haemophilia on to many of the royal families in Europe, including most famously the Tsarevich Alexis, who had haemophilia. Now, what's happened over the last 30 or 40 years, what you have to try and do is replace the missing clotting factor. Now, 40, 50 years ago, they would use whole blood or maybe plasma. The problem with that is that the volume is so large, it's very hard to get any sort of decent concentration of the factor concentrate in the blood. In the 1960s, they started using cryoprecipitate, which was a cold precipitate that they got from plasma, which was useful for treating factor VIII. And then in the 1970s, there was a major breakthrough, and they learned how to concentrate the factor, so-called factor concentrate, which is a concentrated lyophilized form of factor VIII or factor IX, which then you could get a relatively large amount of factor in a small vial and inject it. And this revolutionized haemophilia care. It meant that for the first time, you could treat therapeutically, you could actually effectively treat bleeding episodes. Unfortunately, there was a sting in the tail. What wasn't known at the time was that these factor concentrates were manufactured from large pools of plasma, and in many of these pools were infected with HIV or hepatitis C. So thousands of people with haemophilia were affected by HIV and or hepatitis C right from the 1970s through the early 1990s. In fact, to give you an example, in Ireland in the last 30 years, 116 people with haemophilia have died, and 4 of those have died of haemophilia. 112 have died as the result of unsafe blood products. Now, following that, they learned how to virally inactivate the factor concentrates. So they were able from the early 1990s to very successfully inactivate HIV or hepatitis C in the factor concentrates. And then from early 1994, we started to use recombinant factor concentrates, which are synthetic factor concentrates. So they've been widely used since. So really the switch from the unsafe factor concentrates to a safer plasma-derived factor concentrate, and now to recombinant concentrates in addition to that, has meant a transformation in the quality of life. So we now have available safe and effective plasma-derived factor concentrates, safe and effective recombinant factor concentrates, and we're on the edge of a breakthrough with a whole new generation of longer-acting factor concentrates. The challenge is, if there are new and improved medications, how do you get access to these? How do you get availability of these in any given country? And you know, the days when a patient organisation could rely purely on anecdotal information or emotional argumentation are gone. Yes, you can go and you can go to the media and you can say, you know, I have haemophilia, or my child has haemophilia and he needs treatment, but that won't work with a health ministry. So you need to understand the economics, you need to understand the purpose of the treatment. So for example, in that area, in Europe for the last couple of years, we've actually been doing training workshops where we've been teaching the haemophilia organisation leaders about health technology assessments and economic concepts. We've published on this. We also teach them proactively about the new generation of products. So we have a workshop each year in Europe where we actually look at all the new technologies. And these are superb workshops where we bring together key clinicians and patient organisation leaders to debate and discuss these products and how they should be used and how they will be used and how you get access to them. So, I mean, advocacy is hugely important in haemophilia. A haemophilia patient organisation must be able to firmly and strongly and scientifically argue their case with the health ministry, but they must also understand the economic concepts. In Europe over the last 6 or 7 years, we've gone through a major economic downturn, and all of the economic concepts, cost effectiveness, HTAs, have come into the landscape. They won't be leaving. So we need to make the case for haemophilia care. And I think it's a very compelling case. It's a very compelling case. You can transform the life of a person with haemophilia by giving them access to not just good treatment, but also good comprehensive care.